Our next speaker is Russell Muirhead. Russ is the Robert Clements Professor of Democracy and Politics and Professor of Government at Dartmouth College. Some of his research areas are American constitutional democracy, democratic theory, partisanship and ideology, the theory of work, and auto repair. That will be my question in the Q&A. I discovered Russ initially through the internet, through his outstanding book, Just Work, published with Harvard University Press, some of which I teach in my summer course on work and leisure. And Russ is a good friend of the BC Political Science Department. He's written many articles on topics I listed above, but a few of his articles related to the topic of our conference are Work and Wealth in City Journal, and The Work Ethic in the volume Endangered Virtues. Please welcome Russ to the stage.
If we could raise it, if I could have access to the chalkboard.
Yeah.
That's the only technology
So now we have to figure out how to...
But if it's not possible, it doesn't matter. I can just write imaginary words on the chalkboard. Although here's a piece of chalk.
Let's see, maybe...
What I hear from you, Peter, is a sense that we could be solving the economic problem, as Keynes said, in a different essay from one you quoted in your slide, in his essay, Economic Possibilities of Our Grandchildren. And transcending the human condition, insofar as the human condition has always imposed on people the necessity of work, and entering a different kind of condition, a new state, a new condition. And I want to quibble with that just a little bit in defense of work as an ideal kind of activity. I would want to say we should hope for a life where we can continue to work and not be quite as free as some of what not all of what you said, but some of what you said suggested we might be. So first of just what should we hope for? It's a separate question as to what will actually happen. What is the new economy? What is the future of market society, commercial society, capitalism, call it what you want? What will it actually deliver? That's an empirical question about the future, and I'm not exactly sure. But I want to start with an image of work that I take, that inspires me and comes from my own late dog named Suter, yellow lab, and I would take him out every lunchtime, drive home, take him down to the river, and toss sticks into the river for him for about an hour. He was a real fetch type dog and real retriever. And what was amazing about him, to my mind, as I would witness this, was just how activated he was in this activity. Every single drop of energy came into focus in this activity of chasing sticks. And I watch him and think to myself, what activity am I engaged in which there is no energy leakage? If you heat a house in New England, you think about energy leakage and where the heat is going. And I wonder, what conversation are you in where your mind is not wandering? You're not thinking about what's coming next, or who else you might be talking to, or who's more attractive right behind the person you're talking to right now. When is my energy? I think to myself, all there without any leakage, because that's what I see in this dog of mine, and I wonder, what is my stick? So what is my work? What is my work where I can come so into focus that I lose none of my power? All my power is there. Is it money? Is money my stick? Is it power? There was a bank that came to recruit at Harvard back in the olden days. Drexel came to recruit, and they used to ask people, what turns you on, money, sex, or power? They got kicked off campus for that question. I thought it was an excellent philosophical question that deserved actually a good answer. But what is my stick? What is your stick? That's what I think about looking at the dog. On one hand, I want to just consult this image in two ways. One is an image of repetition and the repetition that's involved in work. And even the work is toil. And another is the freedom and the perfect freedom in a way that the dog exhibited, doing exactly what the dog wanted to do. So in the first image, what is noticeable about this kind of activity is the way every time that dog, every time he gets the stick, he wants to go out and chase the stick again. It's just like an endless loop. And I sometimes wonder if I kept going the stick, I didn't have to go back to work with the dog, would just die of a heart attack, or what would happen that would bring an end to this activity? We never really reached its end. And that is a characteristic of work. That's the characteristic, for instance, that Hannah Arendt saw. Not so much in work, strictly speaking, but in labor, what she calls labor. Work is something better than labor, in her view, the human condition. Shakespeare had his work and his oeuvre, and it left an oeuvre, it left his work, Shakespeare's work, his study. It's his accomplishment, it's the source of his immortality. So we can imagine Shakespeare writing those plays, that was his work. And his work resulted in work, that leaves something permanent in the world. Now Shakespeare also had to eat. Somebody was cooking Shakespeare dinner. Whoever was cooking that dinner was laboring. We don't know who did that. That didn't result in anything permanent. So that labor was just lost to the mist of time. And as soon as Shakespeare ate, you'd have to eat dinner and then eat again a few hours later. Labor is this thing, you can wash your clothes prior to household technology. The project of washing clothes would probably take a middle-class family about 20 hours a week, which is why they needed a servant. You can wash your clothes and feel good when they're folded and clean, but in no time at all they'll be dirty. And so that labor, all that effort just disappears and has to be redone. You can grow food, but that pepper gets eaten and it's just lost. So labor leaves nothing. And it's just part of and the reason it's endless is because our needs are endless. And our needs, as soon as they're satisfied, just grow right up again in the same form and have to be answered to. And so labor is the activity that we undertake to get ahead of our needs and to answer them. If we weren't needful, if we had chlorophyll in our fingernails and solar cells essentially that could produce some sucrose when we were laying on the beach, then we wouldn't have to labor. But it's not our condition the way it is in the oak tree. We have to labor in order to survive. And our survival bids us to labor. And there's nothing particularly lovely about that fact. If we could escape that endless loop, we probably would. And so there's in some sense a kind of irrationality to the dog chasing the stick. And so life is chasing the stick. And indeed, I was down in Austin with this dog, and I hired one of the characteristic Austin slackers, the movie Slackers was filmed in Austin in 1980 something. And she was a slacker, and she came back the first time, having brought him out for his run and swim and all that, and she was disgusted, and she said, "If this dog were a person, he'd be an investment banker." His approach to work was so intense and so unrelenting, and to her so irrational as to be revolting, morally revolting. It's as if he didn't understand that the real task is to transcend this endless loop, to get past it. And by the way, my own students encounter their liberal arts education at Dartmouth College as a very frustrating thing because they understand themselves as inhabiting the same condition. They have to labor. They have to pay back these loans. I mean, you may be absolutely right, and we're older and wiser than they're 19 and 20. And they see themselves having to, make their way in the world and get ahead of their needs. They want to move out of their parents' houses and take on, and they see how expensive everything is. And they consult the curriculum that Dartmouth offers them, and the first thing that they see is how irrelevant it is. And what really frustrates them is that even when it looks like it's going to be relevant, it turns out to be irrelevant. So economics looks like it's going to teach you something about how to make money, but as you know, it doesn't. Because the economists just love studying refrigerator pricing for its own sake, go figure. And even computer science, which is now sort of the most relevant thing in the curriculum, actually is taught in a way that isn't really equipping our students with what Google wants its new hires to know. Because our computer science faculty are just playing games with computers. They're not actually, they just don't care about training people for the workforce. They're just having fun. And similarly in government or political science, we're not really training people how to get power and keep it. That would be a useful thing. But we're like reading Machiavelli like it's just a joy or something. We're not like you really need to learn something. So my students are actually very frustrated about it. And especially if they come from a kind of pragmatic, earthy, worldly background. And And I share with them the frustration. It is, I think it's irrelevant in many respects, and it doesn't help. Liberal arts is just at odds with it. It's a subversive force in a world where you have to work. It educates us, I think, for something other than toil and labor. And you know, of course, it presupposes that the economic problem has been solved. My students don't think it's been solved, but that's what it almost presupposes. Now, as I mentioned, Keynes thought that the economic problem would be solved. In this essay he wrote in 1930, he looks at 100 years and he says, what will the economic possibilities be for our grandchildren in 2030? And he sees these growth rates that never happened before in human history. He compounds them for a century. He says, oh my gosh, they're not going to need to work anymore. Their needs are going to be satisfied. There are two kinds of needs human beings have. One kind of need is just an objective need, like you have a need to eat. And how much can you possibly eat? Even if you want to overeat, how many calories are you going to eat? A few thousand calories when you're my age, and your need has been satisfied. That's just that. How much water can you drink? And so we have absolute needs, and they are satiable. We also have relative needs, this need to feel superior to others. And that is in principle, you know, insatiable, even if you're at the very, very top. Because there's always somebody at your ankles trying to pull you down. But if we can just put relative needs to the side for a second, it's possible in principle to imagine solving the economic problem. Keynes thinks that economic growth is just going to do that. And he says once it does, we are going to need, we're going to move from, how did you put it, what to thriving? Surviving to thriving. So we're going to have to develop new skills to learn how to thrive, whereas for centuries we've basically been attuned to the skills that are needed to survive. And that's where, of course, the liberal education in its classical sense finds its purpose. And you know, as you know, so you've mentioned Aristotle thinks that this liberal education, you could look to the medieval ancestry of liberal education, you could kind of look to Aristotle at the end of the Politics, where in, I think, book 8, he talks about liberal education for a little bit and sketches one out and says that, you know, liberal education is an education for someone who doesn't have to work. For a person who's solved the economic problem, probably because they own slaves. But in our case, because we have technology, that's which is an even better solution. And it's an education in leisure. The Greek word is skole, related to scholarship, which of course is telling, because scholarship is a kind of practice of leisure. You can think of all human time as falling into 3 categories, as Aristotle does. One category is work. And work is a category of time in which we're engaged in activities for the sake of something outside the activity. We're engaged in production for the sake of survival. We're engaged in growing for the sake of eating. Not growing for the sake of growing for the sake of eating. And the second category of time is rest. And that's where we, because we exhaust ourselves, that we're repair our capacities, rehabilitate ourselves, recreate ourselves so that we can go back to work. And that endless loop of chasing the stick, as inspiring as it was, is a kind of endless loop of work and rest. The rest is very short. It's just the time that the dog takes to drop the stick in front of my feet, and then he's ready to go back to work again. And that's all of life. You know, you wake up, you go out in the world, you get dusty, you come home, you do your laundry, you put on some clean clothes, you go back out and get dusty again, over and over and over and over again, until you die. And the only escape from that work-rest cycle is found in the category of time leisure. Leisure is that time, of course, where we engage in activities that are their own point and don't have as their purpose anything outside them. And these activities are easy to imagine. If you've had a liberal education, they're very easy to imagine because liberal education is about training you, habituating you in the capacities that enable you to undertake these activities. Activities like friendship is probably the most important and accessible of them. So you mentioned the time we spend watching television. That just doesn't count as an activity that's intrinsically worthy. That's rest. You're veg out, you don't want to talk, you don't want to interact, you need a half an hour watching whatever. And that's a nice form of rest. But it's not leisure. Friendship, I'd say sports, which is of course a huge part of the budget of these liberal arts colleges and universities. And the most important sports for the sake of leisure are intramural sports, not the not the varsity sports, but the sports that everybody gets to play. And the arts. And again, I think it's the arts, especially done in a mediocre fashion. Not for the sake of, not converting the art into work, but doing it for its own sake. So it's those choirs that are a little off tune, that are really habituating the students in them to be at leisure. And then the highest and best of them is the practice of satisfying their desire to understand things, which is study. And that's the really the hardest skole or leisure. So liberal arts education presupposes that the economic problem is solved, and it trains people for this. And Keynes thinks that that's what everyone's going to have to participate in. Everyone, not just the high IQ, not just the high income, is going to have to experience a liberal education once the economic problem is solved. And in that respect, I'd say our state, as we go from the agricultural to the industrial to the, you said, informational, and I almost want to call it relational economy, because as you said, it's 70% services, it's 20% industrial, making things, and it's 1% agricultural, which is just phenomenal. It just makes my head explode. So I want to call it a relational economy rather than an informational economy. And what's really cool is that example you had of people using computers to play chess and beating the computer. Because that's like the person in relationship, not just to another relational being, but to an a-relational thing, the computer. Triumphing over the computer that can't really relate. That's it. I mean, that's the power of human intelligence in the relational economy. So in the relational economy, it just turns out that the economic problem is largely been solved in liberal education, which is once just the province of the real elite, now finds its purpose, finds its place, finds its relevance. And in that respect, I suppose those of us who make our living teaching the liberal arts can breathe a hearty sigh of relief. We'll still have our jobs. But I think, and what I want to say in closing, is I think that's not right. And I'll tell you, first, Keynes wasn't quite as right. We don't have quite as much leisure as Keynes said. And I was very intrigued by the aggregate statistics concerning leisure that you put up. And I imagine I almost want to get that slide back up there. But I imagine, Peter, that incorporates the time of life when you're retired. That would count as leisure. So the number of decades in which we spend working is probably a little bit.
And before you go to work too.
Okay, so yeah, we're exempting ourselves from the workforce. My grandfather worked on his farm starting, when he was 13. He was working full-time on his farm. My other grandfather didn't get through 8th grade, not because he wasn't smart enough, because he had to work. So whereas I was in school until I was 35. Kidding. That's the way it felt. So maybe that's all leisure. I do notice though, and this is just anecdotal, I think the statistics might bear me out, that lower socioeconomic class individuals have more leisure, unfortunately, than higher socioeconomic class individuals. The knee surgeon who's practicing out at the clinic at Vail is working in a 70-hour week. The consultant at McKinsey is working a 70-hour week. My colleagues, my chemistry colleagues say are working long weeks. The lawyer, the securities lawyer, is working 100 hours a week. And they do it until they retire. They do it from the moment they stop school until the moment they retire. And with a few little punctuated breaks, very expensive vacations. And then on the other side is the person on disability. And I happened to bump into someone who told me she was on disability, and I made the kind of meaning category error of asking her, what her disability was. And she told me how she got approved for disability and how easy it was to get approved in her case. I said, no, I didn't ask how you got approved. I'm just wondering, I'm sorry you're disabled, and I wondered what your disability is. Out of curiosity, you don't have to tell me. Well, she didn't actually have a disability. She just qualified for disability with case. And I didn't get that until we were painfully far into the conversation. So I think there's a lot more work for people who learn how to make their labor valuable. And for them, I'm not sure that, and maybe we think that soon everyone will be replaced by some sort of algorithm, speaking metaphorically. But I don't think so. I think that there are an infinite number of ways that human beings can make themselves valuable to other human beings. and the ways that we're going to, we used to make ourselves valuable by walking behind an ox in the soil and growing something. And we used to make ourselves valuable by working on an assembly line at River Rouge, in the Ford's plant. And that was sort of the epitome of work as necessity. It was this soulless work. I've been reading the oral histories of the workers at the Lordstown assembly plant for the General Motors plant. It's no longer running in Ohio. And they are heartbreaking, these testimonies of just how violent and soul-destroying this assembly line work was. So we're no longer making ourselves valuable doing that, but we are making ourselves valuable by relating to other people. So whether it's the trainer at the gym, a job category that just didn't exist when I was a boy, or the massage therapist, which I also think is a category that didn't exist when I was. All sorts of ways in which people are making this. The garden consultants. There are an infinite number of ways in which we can make ourselves valuable to each other and earn money doing it. And to do that, though, requires emotional and relational intelligence, which is, I think, a consequence of the not just critical thinking, but the collaborative learning that the liberal arts might habituate people to acquire. And it's also the ability to make ourselves valuable to each other in relational activity is also going to be the consequence of developing expertise. And that's the part, expertise, that's not it's not there in the leisure story. And so I think we have one image of work as a response to necessity. It's all pain. It's all toil. It'd be better if we could escape it entirely. We have another image of work as pure freedom, as just love, no need whatsoever, just doing what you love, without any constraint, without anything there that's going to spank you if you don't work hard. So such that if I wake up in the morning, I just want to sleep in, I can sleep in. It's that image of Marx, I can hunt in the morning, fish in the afternoon, criticize after dinner without ever having to identify with one of those roles, i.e. never developing much expertise as a critic or a hunter or a fisher person. And I just don't think that's the kind of activity that we're going to see. And I don't think it's very desirable. I think to make ourselves valuable to each other, to help people, which is the most satisfying thing you sort of said we can experience at the end, we have to develop expertise. And you don't develop expertise without a lot of painful application. Practice. Practice even when it doesn't feel good to keep practicing. Expertise takes work. So I can kind of bifurcate these two images. I can think of my dog as just displaying the endless loop, the response to need. He's been bred to just chase things. Because someone sometime needed a dog to go grab the duck that was just killed. And the dog is like unconsciously, and in an almost tragic way, acting out this breeding, has to work, even though it's irrational. Or I could think of the dog as doing its characteristic activity and living out its love when it's fetching things. And I could think, well, I'm just asking the wrong question when I ask, why is it chasing the stick? It's not chasing the stick to get the stick. It's getting the stick so it can chase the stick. It wants to be engaged in the activity. It doesn't want to finish the activity. It's not making money so it can do something else. It's doing something. It's making money so that it can do something. It's the lawyer who wants to keep lawyering. But that's too... That image of pure freedom is too listless. It mistakes the nature of human motivation. I don't think pure love will ever motivate us reliably enough to become excellent at things. And if we can't become excellent, we won't be able to assist each other and help each other and make ourselves valuable to each other. The image of pure necessity is too inhuman. It's inhumane and it's inhuman. It's a kind of activity that's just at odds with the fullness of the human soul, which is why reading the oral histories of the Lordstown assembly plant is so heartbreaking. So I think these two images, either we're at toil or we're at freedom, are too bifurcated and are kind of missing the point. I think that's how Keynes was imagining things. We have been toiling for, at least 10,000 years since we started settled agriculture. We've been toiling. And the toil got worse and worse and worse. The hunter-gatherers weren't toiling so much, but they didn't live very long. They had very bad lives. farm subsistence farmers lived a little bit better, and not that much better. The industrial workers, we really stripped all the soulfulness out of work completely, made it totally inhumane, but at least we're producing something for the first time in all of human history. And that's the sort of Faustian bargain. And we finally transcend that and solve the economic problem and at warp speed kind of move into a new dimension of freedom. And I think that's just wrong. I think worthwhile activities have an element of necessity to them, of constraint and compulsion to them that make you have to go back and keep working. It's like telling my daughter to practice her piano. You don't know yet whether this is going to be a worthwhile activity, but you're going to have to practice it and play it for 4 or 5 years before you can find out. So there's a lot of necessity and discipline, that has to happen before she'll even experience the freedom and the joy fully of the practice. And when you do get there, you taste the freedom and joy, but it's always mixed in with necessity. And that's, I think, work at its best. And that's, human activity in its most distinctively human. We're not going to, I hope we don't transcend that's the way we should want to spend our time. Not this pure leisure with no necessity whatsoever, not all necessities so that we can't imagine and play. There's no joy, there's no play. But a fusion of the two, where there's a tincture of necessity that keeps us at work and that motivates us to become excellent. And then with our excellence, we can enjoy both the display of excellence and the activity itself for its own intrinsic rewards, and ideally make ourselves helpful to other human beings. So I think we are on the cusp of a new world of work, relational work. I'd hesitate to speculate about all the job categories, what they all might be. But I hope that we will keep working, as far as the eye can see, and working, that we'll work in new ways, and that we'll help each other in ways that we can't presently imagine. And that we'll be able to cultivate excellence and display our excellence and use our excellence for the benefit, to do good work in the world.
A couple minutes for questions.
Yeah.
So it was interesting because you had mentioned excellence, expertise, and I think when you're talking about your daughter and the piano, and I kept thinking of Malcolm Gladwell, who says, what does it take, 10,000 hours to kind of develop any kind of skill? But what's interesting is, in a way, isn't leisure maybe the economics of the future? Meaning, maybe the job is being the piano teacher, being the gym trainer, being all the things that we really want to spend our time on. We'll actually spend our money having people help us pursue all of these activities.
Yeah, I think that's nicely said, and it's exactly what I'm thinking. So I want to describe it as a quibble. I want to take this idea of love and say, in a way, I don't want to say do what you love, because my daughter's not going to love practicing the piano. I also might think about a caddy. This is an excellent sort of, job in a way. A caddy helps you. They're not necessarily, they might be better at golf than you, they might not be, but they understand the game better and they definitely understand the course better. So an excellent caddy can really, really help. But it's, it's work. It takes work. It takes a lot of practice. So love isn't going to be enough. It's not reliable enough. Love is fickle. Love is fickle and we're lazy. So I want to take that image of the work of the future, which is going to be loving work and relational work and human work, and add and just remind us that there needs to be something like necessity, even if it isn't literally hunger, because we've solved the economic problem with respect to food. That has to keep us coming back for those 10,000 hours of practice. And I don't know what Malcolm Gladwell doesn't say is here, how many of those hours, how far in, and it differs by thing, by activity. How many hours in do you have to go before you really experience enough of the intrinsic rewards of the activity that you can kind of use those to fuel you along. Now, my students need to have midterms and hourly exams and final exams if they're going to do work. And I'll sit there like a class where we're reading Abraham Lincoln. I'll say, this is your chance. You're probably not going to have a chance for the rest of your lives to read this speech by Abraham Lincoln, which is going to permanently transform your understanding of things. And this is it. Like, miss it now, blow this course off tonight or this week, and it's gone. You're not going to sit down in your 40s and read the speech. You're not going to remember it's there. So take the chance. That's not enough. I have to say, and it's going to be on the exam. And when I say it's going to be on the exam, I'm like, okay, I better read it. So that's like the recreation of this necessity. And the fact of the matter is that the most highly motivated, it's 1 in 1,000 students who will do the self-education. So you mentioned we don't really need to go to school. The reason you need to go to school is two things. One is you need a community of learners to motivate you to keep learning, because it's such an unusual kind of thing to do. And the normal human thing is say, I know enough, I don't need to learn anymore. Second, I think you need this sort of apparatus that recreates necessity, a punitive apparatus, where you could get an F or a D or a C or an A or something like that. And also, I think what really helps motivate students is a kind of relationship where their pride's invoked. And they know I know them. And I say, you're a good student. I really like that first paper. Keep up the good work. And it's one of the worst things I can say to you. Because now you know that I know what you're capable of. And I'm going to get 3 times as much work out of you after I say that to you as I would if you thought I didn't know your name and didn't know who you were. So that kind of relational thing is also disciplinary. And I think without that, I don't know how many, but when I think about my own learning, sometimes I think, I was I was decades into my job before I really just could fuel it with all curiosity. I was worried about getting a job. I was worried about not getting tenure. There's lots of things to worry about along the way. And I think I was way, way, way in before it was all curiosity and no discipline. And so anyway, that's the part of the good free work that I want to remind us has to be there somehow. And I also want to remind us that work, you mentioned helping people, I just keep thinking that we want to keep working. We want to keep using our, deploying our powers to improve, to do good work in the world, to improve the world as it's experienced by other, living things. And anyway.
Russ, what do you think about social mission organizations, social entrepreneurs who are actually sort of setting up companies that are looking beyond just making profit, but are looking to have bigger societal impact and actual helping people?
Yeah, I tend to think, so one of the kinds of necessities that we create for ourselves is the profit motive, and we design these sorts of firms such that there's a fiduciary responsibility to kind of maximize value for shareholders. It may not be maximizing profit in some individual small unit of time, like Amazon doesn't make much profit. But, and I think I'm fairly impressed with the way profit-driven businesses have benefited human beings and have multiplied the bounty available to everybody. So I just don't have a very negative view of of an entrepreneur who's out there to make money and who takes investments from other people and manages her firm so as to maximize the return on the investment that she's taken from all these people. I think that system of an economy of lots of firms like that just works very well for everybody. And I think those are sociable activities. They're socially beneficial. Now there may be certain purposes that just important human purposes that aren't served very effectively by those firms, even though lots of human purposes are served very effectively by them. And in those cases, it appears that nonprofits and B Corps and other sorts of entities, maybe do reach these purposes more effectively. But that's almost, to me, a technological question. I think you don't have to directly aim at benefiting other human beings to benefit other human beings. You could just aim at building a better router because you want to beat Cisco or something. But sometimes, let me give you an example. So I think the nonprofit university just has unspeakable amounts of waste in it because there is no profit motive anywhere in it. And so maybe we'd actually educate more people more effectively if we somehow could impose a profit motive in there. I don't know. What do you think, Peter? You're more, vastly more about this than I know.
Well, first of all, I think we have a very distorted view of what higher education is, because keep in mind that outside of this country, higher education is public, it's much cheaper. People don't go into huge debts. So, you know, part of the reason that we have this linkage to employment, that we think that we have to create employment opportunities for our students, is because it costs so much. But that's only because we've kind of privatized higher ed in this country in a way that no other country really has done. Other countries are supplying it the way they supply national health insurance and things like that. So I don't know whether a lot of what we're talking about here is really the American sort of perspective on things, and whether if we were in another country, you know, whether this discussion might be even a little bit different.
Yeah.
So we are running a little bit behind schedule.
Yeah.
Let's push this question forward into the panel
Yeah,
discussion.
that's the question, Hank.
Yeah.
Do you want to just ask the question? We can take it up later.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if I can say this quickly, but I'll try. So what I'm interested in, I'm very much in broad agreement with everything that you say, but I'm a little unconvinced that the defense that you mounted for work, as modulated by, you know, necessity, as we call it, is exactly what it turns out to be actually not a defense of work, but perhaps a defense of play. You know, and perhaps the way to sort of think about it is that what we need is training to be better players rather than better workers once we settle the economic problem, so to say, right?
Yeah.
So what I'm thinking about is, you know, the example you had with your dog chasing up the stick, or your child learning to play the piano, their necessity works in a very different way. It's an economic necessity, right?
Yeah.
The necessity that's brought into play to sort of acquire expertise is that serious concentration, you know, in order to sort of gather all your energy so that you can focus, right? And that is what pure joy is. Dogs know that. Children know that. Children know how to play. Just as dogs know how to play, right? But the problem with us, because as adults we are forced by economic necessity to sort of toil, right? Even when we have high-skilled jobs, we're still sort of concerned about that paycheck and that raise and that promotion and all sorts of things. You know, we're motivated differently. So it seems to me that what we're thinking about is not, you know, the work isn't, the opposite of work is not leisure. The opposite of work is play. And play requires a lot of, you know, intense concentration and that kind of what you might call work.
That's brilliant. It's so insightful. Thank you. Yeah. But I want to summarize what I'm saying by saying work and play are not opposites. They're close cousins. We make play out of our work, and we make work out of our play. They're much more closely related than antonym would suggest.
Has a pecuniary aspect to it. I mean, it has that the motivation. So the point is, how do we think about work that is freed from economic necessity, right?
Yeah. So well, let's pick it up further. But that's really astute. Thank you.
Let's thank Russ.